Hello, everyone, and welcome back to my dream world. So, I'm back recapping this past week of Dancing with the Stars, which was Wicked Night. My little theater kid heart was very, very happy with this night. I might be a little biased, but you know what? This was one that I was really, really hyped about. I was a little bit nervous going into it because I was like, oh, are the songs gonna match up well with the styles, But I think it worked out pretty well, all things considered. I loved that the night was put in soundtrack order based on the order of the songs that they go in the movie. I thought that was super cool. And I really enjoyed the opening number. Yeah, it was just basically a recipe for me to love this night, and it was definitely my favorite night so far. Super happy that John M. Chu got to guest judge. But if you're new to this channel, basically I've been watching since season 30, and I decided that since I've been watching for a couple years, I'm going to recap the show now on my channel, now that I'm actually starting to be active on here. Just a reminder that if you haven't seen my videos before, I am not ballroom trained. I've worked in the entertainment industry and I've been around dance pretty much my whole life, but if I say something and it's incorrect when it comes to ballroom technique, feel free to correct me in the comments. That is something I am very open to, listening to people who are actually in this profession. But I'm basically just going off like what I saw in the dance, how I felt about it, and I might describe some things technically, but again, not a trained dancer. So I'm just gonna get into it, go in running order, and then we'll get into overall thoughts and elimination thoughts, because I know this one was a tricky one for some people. But yeah, Scott and Riley opened up the night, and unfortunately, he did end up going home tonight. And I hate to say it, but I kind of see why he did. I'm not necessarily saying I agree with the elimination, because to be frank, I don't. But at the same time, like, I felt quite shaky about this one, especially with the lifts. There were a lot of lifts in this dance because it was a contemporary, so they're allowed to do as many lifts as they want, and pretty much all of them looked very awkward. Like, he's obviously, you know, a bigger man than him, so it wasn't like a size thing. It was mostly that he probably just didn't feel very comfortable doing lifts. Like last year, Joey was a great dancer, but he struggled with lifts. But I think with Scott, he's just kind of a stiff guy. I also kind of felt like Riley was the star of the dance instead of Scott, which is unfortunate because when we're like this far into the show, you really want to start, at least in my opinion, making the celeb be the shining part of the dance, especially on Wicked Night. Like, this is Scott. Scott was talking about how much he loved Wicked. I would have loved to see him be highlighted more throughout the dance. And it was pointed out, actually, I think maybe by John M. Chu, I could be wrong, but the transitions could have been better. The choreography wasn't as advanced as some of the contemporaries we've seen so far. So I'm not surprised that this was one of the lower scoring dances of the night, given how they've been scoring this season. I agree with the sevens. I usually don't score because, again, I don't know the criteria of the way the judges score, and I don't know enough ballroom technique to say, yeah, that was a 7 or that was an 8, whatever. But I did kind of appreciate that it finally was not an overglazed jazz or contemporary, because there are, there do tend to be there's a tendency for the judges to overscore jazz and contemporary because those styles aren't quite as right or wrong. Like, there's not as much specific technique in those styles, so they usually end up scoring them a lot higher than some of the more technical ballroom dances, even though the ballroom dances are harder and, in my opinion, often more impressive. So it's like, I was kind of happy that they didn't give this like 8s and 9s, because I was a little worried that they would. But yeah, this wasn't my favorite of Scott's dances, and, like, he looked like he was having fun. He performed well, but I was just kind of like, sadly, that was not his strongest dance, and I get the scores that he got. I really, really do. And unfortunately, he ended up going home, which was sad because I am a fan of the guy. I'll talk more about this when we get to the actual elimination, but yeah, it was just, Darn. And I don't know if going later in the night would have helped him too much because a lot of people did really well tonight. So it was like, oof, darn, it just didn't seem like this was a good one for him. No hate, but that's just kind of how I felt about the dance. All right, next was Alex, and this is not shade because I feel this way about multiple people, but when we talk about favoritism in production, in the judging, and whatever, there is one thing that bugs me, and that's when they give a celeb a jazz and contemporary or a jazz and a salsa. Like they give back to back dances that allow lips or something. And two people who I do believe to be production faves got jazz and contemporary back to back. Alex was one of them, and that wasn't something that I loved. But, unlike the people that were complaining about her not getting popular, I actually really liked the song choice for her. I thought this worked for her and Val's partnership in a great way. And I would say, in terms of performance, pure performance, this is actually one of my favorites from her because we got to see more of her personality. I felt like she embodied Glinda in this dance very, very well. But she did have, like, I don't know if this is me, but while I was watching it, I felt like she was slightly off time during some moments. And they didn't use the entire stage the way I wanted them to, especially because, like, this is a jazz dance. We can use the whole floor. You can kind of do whatever you want with jazz. It's basically a mini freestyle. So I was kind of like, huh, because they basically just used the mini stage in the back the entire time. And I also kind of felt like there were few moments where she could have hit things a little bit harder. Like, I think she danced well. I think she performed well. But the choreography itself was not my favorite tonight. Obviously, Val is a very seasoned pro. He's a very good choreographer, but his specialty is Latin followed by ballroom. Jazz and contemporary aren't really his thing because he's one of the ones that was like internationally trained where there was a much bigger emphasis on ballroom and Latin, I believe. Again, if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. Feel free, Dancing with the Stars vets, to correct me on that. But like, I did appreciate though that it was a proper jazz, because some gripes that I have with jazz dances on the show is that, like I said, it's a mini freestyle, and so they kind of just like jump around and do whatever they want, and I'm like, okay, but where's the actual jazz technique? Jazz is actually one dance style that I know about because I took some jazz classes for my theater major, so I've seen more jazz and musical theater and all of that than I have ballroom. And like, a lot of times when I'm watching this show, I'm like, that was not a jazz dance. That was them, like last year. Danny and Whitney, very entertaining, wasn't a jazz dance. That, at least from what I could see, that was just for me. But because of that, I like appreciate that it did have a lot of like jazz technique in it. I just didn't love the choreography. It felt underwhelming. And the reason it felt underwhelming to me is because she has had some very well choreographed dances. The contemporary last time, it was very good and she executed it really well. I loved her Viennese waltz. I think her Viennese waltz is still my personal favorite of hers. But, she did a great job with what she was given. I think her scores were fair. In fact, I actually felt like that 8 wasn't entirely inaccurate. I know some people online were saying like Alex deserved 10s. I'm going to disagree with that. I know some people are not happy that she got 9s and 8s, but, I think that a mix of 9 and 8s was actually an appropriate score for her tonight, because if we gave her contemporary all 9s, I know Carrie Ann didn't give her a 9, but if we gave her contemporary 9s, I felt like her jazz was weaker, so a mix of 9 and 8 is fair in my head. But, this isn't any shade to her. I thought she did a good job. I thought she performed well. The choreography was what felt underwhelming to me. All right, next we have Robert, and once again, I don't love that they gave him jazz and contemporary back to back. I called it out for Alex. I'll call it out for Robert too, even though I really love Robert, and I'm more like I'm a Robert fan. I'll admit it, I am. But like, I'm not going to be biased either. I'm going to hold everyone to the same standard, especially because we're at week 6. We're over halfway through at this point, or halfway through, whatever you want to call it. But On the bright side, though, somebody mentioned that from now on, we'll get pretty much pure ballroom and Latin from both Alex and Robert. And that makes me excited because these are two of our front runners, at least in terms of scores and popularity. I think those two are pretty much guaranteed for the finale. So I'm happy to see that from here on out, we are going to get like Latin and ballroom from them. And, that's exciting. But back to Robert's dance. The dance was not as difficult. I would even say it was less difficult than Alex's, for sure. Correct me if I'm wrong, but, she is at a higher technical level than he is, so it makes sense. But I thought his energy was good, his technique was solid. I also preferred this choreography over Alex's choreography, even though hers was harder. Like, hers was definitely more technical, but I liked that because Whitney is trained in jazz, because her training was like a mesh of ballroom, Latin, and jazz, from what I've heard, and from what I've heard from the show and the research that I've done. But yeah, it was really the choreography that made the difference for me, and I loved that it had some tricks, but it wasn't just tricks. So I was like, thank you, Whitney. Your contemporary and jazz expertise actually came out this season, and I'm happy with it. It wasn't a perfect dance. Again, a lot of people are saying Robert deserved 10s. I don't think he's hit a 10 yet for me. It's just because he has a few like minor technical things, sometimes he doesn't fully follow through with his transitions in the dance. So I would not give this a 10, but I had a lot of fun watching him. I think this may have been, from what I could see, his least stiff dance so far. And I love that he called Whitney another big sister to him. If he keeps improving, I will not be upset if he wins. Currently, I do have other favorites over him in terms of like dance ability and who I'm enjoying watching. Journey-wise, because, there's a lot of things we have to take into account when we're deciding who are our favorites. But I do really enjoy this man and his journey, and he just is having an absolute blast on the show, I can tell. Yeah, there's pretty much, like, not a perfect dance. I'm gonna be real. It wasn't a perfect dance, and I'm not gonna be overly biased. If we're gonna be hard on Alex for the choreography, I'm gonna be hard on Robert for the technique, and he hasn't hit a 10 for me yet, so I get why he got 9s, but, I hope he keeps improving. I hope that Whitney has kind of locked in and been like, okay, we gotta get those scores back up, because he was plateauing a little bit, and now he's kind of, bouncing back up. So I'm excited to see what he's gonna do for Halloween night. All right, next we have Whitney and Mark. Let me make this very, very clear. I do not care for this woman. I haven't watched her show. I don't have any emotional attachment to her whatsoever. But I think people are hating on her a little bit too much. Why are we mad that she got popular? It is not that serious. Popular was clearly kind of made a quick step song for this week. And Alex had a quick step in week 3. Whitney has not had a quick step, so she got the song. It's not unfair in my eyes. In fact, I actually think she was at a disadvantage not having a contemporary or a jazz, because the ballroom dances, like we've mentioned, are more technical and are harder, especially considering how fast they made the song. So I was like, dang, this actually might be more difficult for her. I thought it was great. I will say, because some people did point this out, I actually got in an argument with someone on TikTok. No tea, no shade. But I wish, and I will acknowledge this, I wish they got in hold faster. But other than that, this was a proper quick step, and I genuinely enjoyed that performance. Y'all don't have to like this woman. Y'all don't have to vote for her. I personally do not vote for her, and I haven't. But the dance was great. I'm not a hater. I can admit when somebody danced really well, even if I don't care for them as a person. I don't know, again, I don't score these dances, but I don't know if it was a 10 for me, because I did, like, when I was watching her footwork, I was like, I don't know, I could have just seen it be a little, correct me if I'm wrong, but I could have seen it be a little bit sharper. Because sometimes I was like, that her footwork felt a little bit, like, obviously she was keeping up with Mark, but I was kind of like, does it feel a little bit lazy to anyone else? I could totally be wrong. Maybe it was the angle, maybe it was the dress, it could have been covering her feet weirdly. I have no idea. But it it deserved at least nines. And if you say that it doesn't, then you're just a hater. I'm sorry, you are. And she redeemed herself from last week because last week was not her best, and I do think she should have been marked down for it, but whew, I know people are mad that she got 3 10s and a near perfect score, but honestly, I'm not mad at it because I thought it was a good dance. I had a lot of fun watching it. It wasn't my favorite of the night. It wasn't my favorite, but it was a top 3 dance for me tonight. I really, really enjoyed it. And like it or not, this woman can perform and Mark's choreography is great. So I can't hate. Next, we have Dylan, and I complained that Dylan got overscored last week, and frankly, I do stand on that because I don't feel like it was the best dance of the night. But this week, he impressed me. He impressed me because the technique definitely improved. A rumba is not an easy dance, and if we compare the way he moved versus the way he moved during the samba, there was definitely improvement there. It wasn't perfect, but I do actually think that this might be one of my favorites from him because this is, correct me if I'm wrong, but the most technical content we've gotten from him so far, especially in a Latin dance. I'm proud of him. I really, really am. I think his scores were fair for once. He didn't get overscored. I was like, thank God. We're not glazing him, or at least I'm kind of glad that he wasn't overscored in the sense that it made up for him being overscored last week. But I have nothing to say other than I think he improved. I thought he did a good job. Before I get into Andy, we had a Queen Michelle Yeoh cameo. Like, not only Cynthia, not only Ari, but Queen Michelle Yeoh too. So I was cheering in my room and probably scared my roommates, but it's fine. But on to Andy. I love that green suit on him. I'm just gonna get that out of the way. His journey has been absolutely lovely, and I'm proud of him. And I actually found myself welling up a little bit during this dance because he improved. This was definitely his best dance so far. I do still think that he should have gone home because he's the weakest dancer left. And because keep in mind, for this elimination, we're taking account last week and this week. So based on that, I do think he should have gone home. However, I kind of liked this dance more than Scott's. Oh! Okay. Before anyone crucifies me, I'm talking like performance. Because, when we see the improvement in someone, it's like, clock it. But I do think that Scott deserved to stay over him because he had more potential to improve. He isn't improving as fast. This is elimination talk. So I'll get into it more later. But, I do think that Andy should have gone out tonight because he would have gone out on a high, and next week might be rough for him, and it's also his birthday, and getting eliminated on his birthday would really suck, so it's like, and, since they have been giving him 6s, the 7s didn't feel completely crazy because he did improve, but it's like, we should have been scoring him lower from the get-go because that was not a 7 to me. Like, I don't think that was a 7, I think that was a 6, but it was kind of like, if we gave him all 6s last week and he improved, then yeah, we kind of have to give him a 7. So once he got those 7s, I knew Scott was in danger, unfortunately. And I was like, oh God, in comparison to people who aren't getting as many votes, he could end up sending a heavy hitter home. So I was like, oh no, but you know what? I really have nothing bad to say about Andy, and I don't hate the fact that he's staying, but it's kind of starting to get to the point where I'm like, how long are we going to let him coast? How long are we going to let this man stay in the game? Because he is glaringly now the weakest dancer left, because I'll get into it later, but it's like, how long are we letting this man stay? Like, let me know in the comments. Are we really going to take him to the finale? Because I don't know if I like that idea. As much as I love him, I'm kind of like, okay, clock's ticking, Andy. I'm sorry, you're adorable, I love you, but go get that hip surgery and enjoy your birthday, Next was my queen, Elaine. She finally got a good song. I was so happy for her, and she was robbed last week with those 7s. Tell me why this dance made me cry more than literally any other dance last week. Like, that's kind of embarrassing. I needed to calm myself down after watching that dance. The one critique I have is, and I called it out for Whitney too, so don't come swinging at my head, but could I have seen more dancing during the last portion of the dance? Yes. But with that moment, that was special. Her at the end defying gravity. It was special, and I am so happy for her. And the dancing through that she did do was wonderful. So I do think the nines weren't necessarily uncalled for. Like, some people are really mad that she did not get tens, and I pointed out on TikTok that, I kind of get why she did. I would have loved to have seen her get tens too, by the way, but I was like, I kind of get why she got the nines, and people got mad at me, and I was like, bruh, I have literally been writing for this woman this whole time, and you're gonna come at me? Okay, whatever. But, I absolutely adored this dance. It was one of my favorites of the night, top two for me. And I am so happy for Elaine. She got her moment. I checked YouTube like a few minutes ago, and she was third most viewed, only behind Robert and Alex the last time I checked. So finally, my queen getting the recognition she deserves, and I hope that she gets tens next time because she deserves it. And honestly, I need this woman in the finale because I'm going to be very sad at this point if she doesn't make it. Next, we have Jen. I do feel like she's being a little bit too hard on herself, especially considering she was sick last week. And so she probably had less rehearsal time, and thus her dance wasn't as clean as it could have been. But, I thought she danced very well this week. But I did see multiple people kind of pointing out, where was the foxtrot? So I agreed with Derek's comments. I know, there has been a lot of where's the foxtrot? Where's the samba when it comes to Whitney's dances? But with Jen's, that clearly lacked foxtrot content for me. And, people can argue for days about that, but at the end of the day, I just didn't feel like that had enough foxtrot content in it. I know some people also were saying they would have preferred this dance to be a rumba over a foxtrot. I cannot say because I'm not a ballroom dancer, so I don't know if that would have helped them or not. But I do just kind of feel bad for Jen because she has a lot of potential to do well. But, and this isn't shade to Jan because I think he's a great dancer. He seems like a nice guy. But he does also seem to have glaringly less ballroom training. So it feels like she's not getting the technique boost that she needs. And I worry that she might be in danger, at least in in the next few weeks. It's going to get tougher and tougher about who to eliminate and the scoring and everything. And I feel like she is starting to feel the heat of the competition because she started this out so bubbly and excited and, full of energy. And now I just feel like, it could be her recovering from being ill. But this week in particular, she seemed a little bit downcast. And that makes me sad because she, I've always talked about how I love Jen's energy and she seems so excited to learn and everything. And I'm just kind of like, yeah, it's a little, seems like the competition it's like that mid-season slump that a lot of people get. But, I hope she does well. I like Jen. So I'm like, I want good things to happen for her. But, I'm going to be impartial when it comes to dancing. And it's just not my favorite because she performs and dances well. But it's either the choreography or she makes some pretty glaringly obvious technical mistakes. And I'm just like, oh, okay, darn. But yeah, I'm going to move on. Next we have Danielle. And this is the one that I was excited for because while I don't really like the way Carrie Ann phrased her comment last week, she was kind of right in the sense that we haven't really seen much variety in energy from Danielle. Like, all of her dances have been happy or cute or, empowering. She's always had a big smile on her face. So her having an Argentine tango in a completely different mood, very different style than she's done so far, completely different tone, more serious. I was excited for this. And I saw the technique. One thing I was going to say is that she could have been sharper, and I didn't feel like the choreography worked with the song that they had. It just felt like they were dancing way faster than the music, and it didn't match up for me, unfortunately. But the judges acknowledged, this is a very hard song, and I'm glad Bruno was kind of like, props to you, because that was a hard one. like, this felt even weirder to me song-wise than Jen's dance did. And Jen's dance was having discourse even before they performed it, but I was like, geez, something felt very off. So I'm very glad that the judges didn't tear her to shreds. Dare I say, I actually think they overscored her quite a bit. I thought she was going to get all 8s, and she ended up actually getting all 9s. But I love her. She's one of the ones I'm rooting for because I've been listening to her podcast, and I love her energy with the cast. She just seems like she's so excited to learn, and I've been enjoying her journey, so I'm happy for her. And I can forgive it because I do think she's been underscored within the past few weeks. I do think they've been a little bit too hard on her. So, I was like, maybe this is them making up for her scores last week or making up for previous weeks. I don't know. So, even though I do think she was a little overscored, I was happy for her. And closing out the night, we have Jordan. 1, she looked absolutely stunning. Ezra's costume, but Jordan looked gorgeous. She, 2, ate with that first spin, turn, whatever lingo. I don't know the exact move, but I believe it was a turn. She ate with that. As soon as I saw that, I knew she was going to slay. And 3, I was crying again. In all seriousness, like, after that opening move, I was like, and I started crying. But yeah, this was my favorite dance of the night. This is the couple I'm rooting for, bar none. And she got the highest score of the night, tied with Whitney on period. She was only 1 point under Whitney, including both nights. Call me over dramatic, but I think I scared my roommates jumping around the room after seeing that dance. The theater kid really came out of me tonight. I will say, like, I'm not gonna get mad that she didn't get a perfect score. I'm happy with the scores that she got, especially because she's been, like, getting all 8s, and now suddenly she's got 10s and 9s. Like, that's great. And it also actually makes me a little bit nervous for her, because now it's like, okay, you've hit a 10. Can you keep hitting a 10? Or are we gonna, get a weird mid-season plateau? But I think she's just gonna keep working hard because Jordan has fantastic work ethic. But when it comes to the scores, some people might not like that I'm going to say this, but I'm not mad at Derek for giving her a 9. Like, I'm not angry with that. But I do think it's kind of silly that from what the comment he made, he seemed to dock her a point for, like, performance or emotion. Which is weird to me, because I feel like she might not be quite as, like, vibrant as Whitney is. Like, Whitney almost overperforms, if anything. Or Elaine, like, even Elaine and Danielle can be more, like, bubbly and vibrant than Jordan is. But to say that Jordan's not performing is kind of crazy to me. And I'm gonna point out this pattern. Are we really going to do this whole, I just need a little bit more emotion or performance-wise from you, to the one remaining black woman on the show? Because this is a pattern in this show. Like, last season we had it with Chandler, season 32 we had it with Charity, and so on. Like, we can go back. We had it with Normani, we had it with Simone. Like, we can go back with all that. Actually, I don't know if that happened to Normani. I don't remember that season quite as thoroughly, but it definitely happened to Simone. It's been a pattern. And even Carrie Ann, who is usually the one that is making this comment, was kind of, like, gagged, if I recall correctly. I remember Carrie Ann was kind of like, Derek, your bias is showing. Like, he's very biased towards Robert. I mean, he gave him an 8 in week 1 when he probably shouldn't have. But Derek, I am actually kind of finding myself being annoyed with Derek's scoring this season. Again, I'm not mad at him for giving her a 9 necessarily, because, there could have been a technical error that I didn't see. But if he docked her a point based on performance for that dance, I'm calling whack on that. But I'm not going to end this on a negative note. I absolutely love this dance, and I'm so, so happy for Jordan. That's my girl. I've been rooting for her since day 1, so I'm really happy. And I've already, like, intertwined all of this into, Andy's and Scott's sections, but I was momentarily shocked when Scott got eliminated. However, after sitting on it for a minute, I was kind of like, you know what? It makes sense. I'm not mad at it, I'm not super surprised by it. And I should have seen it coming because Andy only scored 1 point lower than him. So it kind of came down to votes. The one thing that does surprise me is the Riley stands actually didn't come through this season, because we got Harry Jowsey to almost semifinals, which is unhinged to me, when he should have been out like week 4 or something. But, you know, and also Steven last year got all the way to the finale. And, like, my thoughts on this, like, that's why I kind of thought, like, maybe he'd be safe and maybe he'd make it farther. I was actually not entirely worried about him when it came to votes. But, you know, he started getting less views last week. I have opinions on why that could have happened, but I'm not going to put it in here because I don't want to get too negative. But I really did think that the Riley fans were going to come through. And I'm not saying Riley stands to, like, hate on Riley or anything. I enjoy her as a dancer. But, you know, she has a very dedicated, almost mob mentality group of fans that I am not a part of because I don't do parasocial relationships. That's weird. But I really thought that Scott was going to be here for another week or two. I do personally believe that he should have stayed over Andy, but this week was not his strongest. And I do think that other than Andy, he was the weakest dancer left. Like, that bottom 3, like, even knowing that may not be the true bottom 3, I was kind of like, you know what? I'm not going to crash out over any of these people leaving because they aren't, like, any of my favorites. And, you know, like, if I had to pick one, I would pick Andy because, yes, he's been consistently the glaringly weakest dancer of the group for weeks now. And, you know, I do think he did better tonight because there wasn't as much ballroom technique and he could have focused more on performance, and, you know, that led him more room to move and kind of just go with the music. So, like, yes, he did improve tonight, but is that improvement going to keep showing? Because unless they give him a contemporary next week, he's going to have another ballroom or Latin dance, and he especially struggles with the Latin, from what I can see. So I'm kind of like, Scott had a little bit more potential to do well and give us another good dance, even though tonight wasn't his best. You know, not a great dance, but a good dance, you know? And I have more fun in general watching Scott than I do Andy, because I'm like, okay, he improved, or like, yeah, he brought some personality here, whatever. But I feel like I'm not angry with it, but I'm kind of sad because I feel bad for Scott because I think he's lovely. Like, even though I didn't love his dancing, I thought he was an absolute gem. And I know how much he loves Wicked, so I was just kind of like, it's a shame that, like, you know, this cute, precious gay man got eliminated on Wicked night. That feels so counterintuitive. But even though he wasn't my favorite celeb on the show, he has gained a fan in me, and I am very sorry to see him go. I think he could have had another week. That's just me, assuming that Andy goes next week. But yeah, overall thoughts on the night. John M. Chu, you represented us film folk well. He was a fair guest judge, and I think his knowledge of working on musicals with very big dance numbers like we have In the Heights and Wicked, that makes him a fair judge, because some people were like, you know, you could have brought in the choreographer, or you could have brought in someone else. But this man, like, has experience working with music and working with dancing. I think it was perfectly fair and awesome that they got him as a guest judge. I will admit, I'm biased, because, fun fact, John M. Chu's family, his parents own a restaurant in the town next to where I grew up. So I went to his parents' restaurant all the time as a kid. Like, I grew up there, and his dad is absolutely lovely. I've met him personally. And my mom was kind of gagged because we usually do takeout, but when she went to go eat there in person, she saw the Crazy Rich Asians poster, and it is a Chinese restaurant. So she was kind of like, why is this poster in here? That feels kind of weird. So she asked them about it, and then they told her, like, oh, it's his son's movie. And we were like, oh my gosh, Chef Chu's, the restaurant, that's what it's called, is John M. Chu's family's restaurant, which is totally dope. I got so excited my elbow just cracked. But granted, I may be a little bit biased about John M. Chu because I love him. Bay Area represent. However, Like, I really do believe that he was a good guest judge. I know some people were kind of like, he's not qualified, but I disagree. I think he has enough experience in the film world when it comes to musical numbers that he was a fair enough judge. And I think he even scored lower. He scored Alex lower than the rest of the judges, which I was like, oh, they are gonna tear him for that. But I thought he was very fair throughout the night. I know some people were kind of like, he should have, no, but I don't feel that way. I thought he did a good job. Maybe not Kim Johnson level feedback, but I enjoyed him as a guest judge. And speaking of guest judges, next week we have Cheryl Burke. Some people are super hyped. Some people are not happy about this. I personally am intrigued. I am not against this at all. And I love that it's a ballroom trained former pro that will give accurate feedback. But, I did listen to her podcast in previous seasons and she was harsh. Very technical and harsh in terms of her scoring. And I actually think we kind of need this energy. Like, we need a harsh technical judge on the panel because some of these judges are just too wishy-washy. But I hope she keeps that energy, because if she doesn't, I'm going to be like, okay, what was the point of you, coming on here if you weren't going to give the critique that you had been giving on your own platform? But, like, when people think that she's too negative on her podcast, for me, like, she's pretty genuine about it. I mean, I don't love, like, people have said, like, she's trash talked some people and whatever. I'm not getting into that because I don't follow her that closely. I don't have any, like, strong feelings about that, but I know she kind of seems like a Debbie Downers to some people. So I'm like, Cheryl, I want you to keep consistent technical critique throughout the night and I will be happy. So consider me intrigued, not hyped, but intrigued. Next point is that I was right. This night made me more emotional than dedication night. Maybe I'm weird, maybe I'm a biased theater kid, maybe I was a monster last week but decided to be a loving puppy today, or yesterday actually, because I'm recording this later. But one, my two favorites, Elaine and Jordan, they ate tonight, so I was happy. And two, the elimination did make me sad. Again, like I said, I'm not angry, but, I was sad for Scott. I think, assuming that Andy goes next week, y'all, he and Andy could have swapped places, and I would have been happier with that. The conversation, one last thing that I want to bring up is that I've seen this conversation come up multiple times, and I actually, like, made a comment about it on TikTok, and a lot of people were telling me, like, yeah, I totally agree. Derek and Julianne need to swap roles. Because I've seen a lot of people complaining about Julianne's hosting, Derek being an inconsistent judge, whatever. Like, I think those two, they made their mark on the show. So they deserve to be a part of it. I'm not one of those people that's like, get them off the show. But I'm kind of like, from what I saw, because I haven't watched all the old seasons, I'm going to do that soon after this season's over, because I'll actually have time to binge. But from what I saw in the couple, like, critique panels I saw, Julianne's a good judge. And she's pretty consistent with her scoring. And Derek, he's very charismatic and he has good hosting energy. If they swapped roles, I actually think this show could be smoother. Now, would that mean we'd have to switch Alfonso to a female host? Not necessarily. I mean, I think Derek and Alfonso could be a fun duo, and we're adding a female voice to the judging panel per se. So I wouldn't be against it. But let me know what you think about that. But that's all I have for you tonight for Wicked Night. And I don't know why I keep saying tonight. Like, this will be up tomorrow morning for y'all. I don't know why I'm saying tonight. But that's all I have for you about Wicked Night and about the show for now. Let me know what you thought. If you disagree with me, that is totally cool. Go ahead and put it in the comments. Again, I'm not ballroom trained, so you could say, like, Karina, you're totally wrong about that comment that you made. Cool. That's fine. All I ask is that you do it kindly, because we do not need any more toxic energy in this world. Like, there's a difference between having a different opinion, constructive criticism, versus just getting mad at people for not feeling the same way you do. And there's a lot of that in this fandom, so I just want this space to be open for people to talk about their favorites and why they feel that way. So please go ahead and comment and like and subscribe if you got this far. I appreciate you, and I will see you all next week for Halloween night. Bye!